Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I've got the all-new Rigorer AR2, and thanks to Rigorer for sending me a pair of these to check out. However, this video is by no means sponsored, and all opinions, good, bad, and indifferent, as always, are all my own. Now, the AR1 I thought was one of the best debut signature shoes out there. That thing was phenomenal, so I did have pretty high hopes for the twos, and in a lot of ways they do deliver. Starting off in the uppers, I'll say that the one thing I don't like much about the uppers to start off with is the tongue. It does have a pretty thick pad going more proximal on the tongue. I still did have some lace irritation on these for a little while until I broke them in, and if I really wanted to crank down on them, honestly, I was probably just thinking I was gonna need to put a moleskin pad underneath of the tongue to stop a little bit of that irritation. It is just like so breathable and airy. I mean, you are getting that, which is really nice, but you are sacrificing a little bit on that padding. If you go into the lace line, there is no runner's knot, but I only had mild heel slippage in these. The gusset on these, pretty aggressive. You do get a decent amount of rear foot padding, and the ankle collar and heel counter, they're pretty supportive. You do get an internal heel counter in these, and then you do get basically just, backing on the outside to give it a little more support, but also that does allow it to tie down a lot better, which is nice. Then going into the forefoot of the shoe, there is kind of like a lot of jersey material on the inside of the shoe, so it is comfortable in the forefoot. As you can see on the outside, there's some TPU weaving out there that should allow for some heat egress, but on the inside, like I said, it is pretty continuous. There's not a lot of pores under there. So if you look at these things on the breathability test, they did heat up 105.7 degrees, which in and of itself is good. It's just that, with how porous the tongue is and how porous it looks on some parts, at one point I thought like maybe it'll get under 100 degrees, but it's just that solid fabric in the forefoot that I think is holding on to really any heat or moisture. You look at these things on the breathability mapping, you can kind of see where fog's starting to come out. A lot in the tongue for sure. So like I said, most of the egress is coming out of the tongue, which, like I said, is fine because like the forefoot does feel pretty padded, does feel pretty plush and comfortable. So you are getting kind of the best of both worlds there. And on the upper durability test, 10-second highest grit sandpaper, yeah, the burr does make it through the waxy drag guard and does start to work some of the TPU weave. The thing is, you do get like a dedicated toe drag guard there, and you do get outsorbent that comes up over. So if you're not a super everter, then I think you should be fine. But if you are someone that tends to drag a little bit higher on the uppers, they probably will start to look pretty weird on outdoor courts. But I think the unsung hero of the uppers, honestly, it's all the reinforcement on the lateral side of the lace line and some of the backing on the medial side. All this stitching over here and reinforcement, especially going into the lace line, does create a lot more containment. And so yeah, it might look like window dressing or decoration, but things like that, at least to me, are a big part of why a shoe like this can be so containing with, at some points, very thin material. All right, but getting into the midsole teardown, I had a heck of a time getting through this shank. This thing was Adidas Harden levels of difficult to get through in the best way once again. You do get an entire bed of supercritical eTPU and nylon foam, and it does feel pretty darn springy underfoot. That shank is super thick. It does send a little leaflet here into the forefoot as well. Like I said, it was difficult to get through, and for a bottom-loaded shank, you could feel the influence on foot. These definitely feel like they have some really decent support under these things. And what I like about supercritical foams, right, this is supercritical eTPU. And with the supercritical foam, a lot of times you're getting the best of both worlds. So you can get the structure of EVA or eTPU sometimes, because those foams can be very, very side-to-side stable. That's why EVA is used a lot in basketball, tennis, and pickleball. But when you blow it with gas, then you start to get a lot of those same properties of the more explosive foams, but you also get the structure of some more of the traditional ones. So to me, like supercritical EVAs and eTPUs like these, I mean, supercritical TPE is awesome, don't get me wrong, but I do really like kind of that combination and how you're kind of taking just kind of simpler technology, right, and just tweaking it to make it really kind of best of both worlds. Look at this thing on the bound tight test. Got 43 centimeters in the rear foot, shocker, 43 in the forefoot. Usually supercritical foams are very insulating, right? They're very consistent. It really doesn't matter if the stack is higher or lower in a lot of cases. There's some exceptions to that, but that's the other good thing about supercritical foaming is that it does stay consistent across the drop of the shoe, which I really like. Speaking of the bound tight test and all these new foam technologies aimed at, feelings of more bounce or more responsiveness, it is interesting that today's sponsor, Power Step, has actually done the same thing going down actually a very traditional route with their new Morton's Extension Orthotic. Now, these have a leaflet that goes into the forefoot to create the same type of leaflet you would see, say, in a Curry basketball shoe, or really any leaflet that goes into the forefoot of a shoe, creating more of a diving board effect. Now, the Morton's Extension was originally designed for people with big toe joint arthritis, right? Just trying to shield that big toe joint from having to bend, because anytime it bent, it would hurt. An interesting off-label use case of that, though, is getting more of a diving board effect in your shoes. So if you're putting these in a shoe that maybe doesn't have a shank, or has lost a little bit of its pop, you can get that forefoot leaflet in the PowerStep Morton's Extension, but unlike some other gate plates or things you can put in your shoes that really kind of decrease the amount of ground feel you get, because that leaflet really largely only goes into the big toe joint, the rest of the orthotic is still just that same, nice cushioned EVA and eTPU that you can still get a lot of proprioception through. So you get a lot of the same jump force and diving board effect of a forefoot leaflet without sacrificing the ground feel, which I think is really nice. You can actually get these now over the counter on powerstep.com. I'll leave a link in the description below. And I think I'll be interested to see where these sell the best. Do they sell the best for people that actually have arthritis, hallux limitus, things like that? Or are they gonna be used more off-label for what I think is a really interesting use case, which would be to more substitute a forefoot leaflet in a shoe maybe doesn't have one, or a shoe that's maybe starting to kind of lose a little bit of its pop. All right, but getting into the outsole tread, this is basically, it looks like a scribbled on, really gentle, wavy herringbone pattern that goes pretty much all the way through the shoe. It's kind of broken up by the shank, to be honest, but it is continuous. On the grip test ramp, doesn't slip till 41 degrees, so initial grip really good. And the grip does resist its dust pickup. It does pick up dust. I didn't notice a ton of detriment from that either. I didn't find myself having to wipe these down a ton. Yeah, I mean, they did pick up a little bit, but the durometer on these is a little bit higher. You look at these things on the outsole durability test on Tech and Tie Grit sandpaper. I mean, almost a millimeter of damage on these things. The lines rubber are actually a little bit wider. And with the durometer being higher, I think if you're not a dragger or a slider, I do think you can use these on outdoor courts. I mean, the foam is protective enough for outdoor courts. They breathe well enough for outdoor courts. So, I think it's kind of right in that middle ground between, still having pretty consistent, confident grip on indoors, but also being able to take them outside. I look at this thing on the speed ratio, comes in at a 2.96. Fang score of 0.3 brings it up to a 3.26. And yeah, I think for north to south speed, like long distance speed, I think that is exactly where they belong. I mean, these things do have a lot of stopping power for a shoe that doesn't have a huge lateral flange. It does have this giant TPU bar that goes kind of all the way almost from the underside of the midsole, like it kind of, it's almost on the same level of the outsole, and then goes up all the way, rides into the uppers. So the stopping power in these things is really good for a shoe, like I said, doesn't have a huge outcropping there. What I noticed is that they're not the most nimble side-to-side shoes, right? Like they're not the Player One Plus for sure, but for what they're designed for, yeah, I think they're pretty darn speedy, like I said, especially going north to south. All right, but getting into the fit of the AR2, this is where I think they diverge a little bit from the AR1. They do come in at a 12-degree in-flare, which isn't, it's not terrible. It's starting to get up there a little bit. They do come in at 28.9 centimeters in length, 9.5 centimeters metatarsal width, 10.5 centimeters of toe box width, and then a toe box taper of 29 degrees. So in the midfoot, they're just a little bit more generous than the AR1 was. I remember the AR1 was pretty narrow, and honestly, it was nice because I recommend like a really elite shoe for narrow feet. So that was nice. These ones, like I said, much more forgiving. I did not have cramping from this TPU bar. It's just flexible enough, and I think the midfoot was just wide enough for me that I did not cramp in this. I thought I was gonna cramp like crazy with this thing, and I did not. So I'd say a narrow foot. I do think you can go down a half size in these as long as you don't have like any lumps or bumps if you want to get that performance fit. If you just want to go true to size on them, I think that's fine. They lock down one up. You can go true to size. A medium, I go true to size. A 2E, I would go true to size. And a 4E, if you feel like breaking them in, I'd go true to size. If you're a little bit longer in a 4E, I'd just go up a size in these things, just to get the lockdown on them. And a 2E can go up a size in these things. The one thing I would caution you in is if you're having to crank the laces down more, you might start to get more irritation if you're starting to go up in sizes. So having the shoe just fit a little bit more glove-like will prevent a lot of that lace irritation. That's why I say maybe a narrow foot. If you're shorter, you can go down that half size just to get, less lace irritation. So that's a little bit niche there. And in terms of people, like I would be recommending these for, or in terms of lumps, bumps, bruises, snake bites on your feet, You know, I would say that the person that wants a little bit more ease going up and down the court, right? Someone that maybe suffers from shin splints, things like that. These are really good shoes for covering a lot of mileage on a basketball court. It's just don't expect them to be the most shifty shoes on the planet. They are bottom light feeling, which is really nice. And I do like the protection these give you for how light they do feel on the bottom of your foot. So that I really think is great. But to me, it's someone that needs consistency underneath of their foot. So someone that's maybe coming back from an injury, something like that, from heel pain, Achilles tendonitis, forefoot pain, just needs consistency and more durability from the foam underfoot, especially if you're putting in orthotic into these things. So really it's for that bottom of foot pain, forefoot pain, bottom of the heel pain, things like that, just where you need the ultimate consistency, or somebody who is trying to combat some shin splints because you are getting quite a bit back from that foam, but also it's not a shock machine going up your leg too. So love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, especially if you were a huge fan of the AR1, maybe someone that kind of was on the fence from the AR1 because of how narrow they are. Maybe these ones a little bit more forgiving in the midfoot, you know, do they bring you to the table? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you do want to see what Nike has been up to recently with their GT Jump Academy, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect, rubber, and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.